The afternoon sun was soft that day, shining through the cafe window and painting the small tables with a warm golden glow. The gentle hum of chatter mixed with the hiss of the coffee machine, and the smell of roasted beans filled the air. At a corner table near the window, a young woman named Maya sat quietly, glancing at her watch every few minutes. Her hands fidgeted with the handle of her cup, her heart beating a little too fast. She had been looking forward to this day all week. It wasn't just another afternoon for her. It was her first blind date. Her best friend had set it up, telling her the guy seemed kind, smart, and funny. She had imagined how it might go. A few awkward laughs at first, maybe a little nervousness. Then an easy flow of conversation, and perhaps by the end, that quiet feeling that told her something real had begun. But now, sitting there in her light blue dress, Maya wasn't so sure. She had arrived 15 minutes early just to make sure she didn't miss him. She checked her reflection in the phone screen. Her hair was neatly tied back, her lips a soft pink, her makeup light but enough to make her feel confident. Her hearing aids shimmered under her hair, though she had switched them off to avoid the overwhelming noise of the cafe. She relied mostly on sign language and lip reading, and she had already prepared a small notepad to write on, just in case her date didn't know how to sign. Still, she couldn't stop her hands from trembling slightly. When she looked out the window, people hurried past, couples laughing, friends chatting, parents walking with their kids. Maya loved watching them, but sometimes it also reminded her of what she missed. The ease of communication, the natural rhythm of sound and laughter she could only imagine. She took a deep breath and looked at her phone again. The message from her friend popped up. "He said he's on his way. Don't be nervous, you'll do great." Maya smiled softly. She wanted to believe that. A few minutes later, she saw a man walk into the cafe, tall, dressed in a dark jacket, looking around. He seemed to be searching for someone. Maya's heart gave a small jump, and that had to be him. She raised her hand a little, hoping to catch his attention. Their eyes met, and he walked toward her. For a moment, everything inside her fluttered with hope. When he reached the table, she stood and smiled brightly. She lifted her hands and signed a simple hello, then pointed to her notepad and wrote, "Hi, I'm Maya, so nice to meet you." The man, Luke, as her friend had said, paused. His smile faded just a little, replaced by something unreadable. He looked at her hands, then at the notepad, then back at her face. "You're deaf?" he asked slowly, his voice uncertain. Maya nodded, still smiling, trying to keep the moment light. She had been through this before. That small pause, the flicker of discomfort, the shift in someone's eyes when they realized she couldn't hear. But she always hoped it wouldn't matter. She picked up her pen and wrote again, "Yes, I can read lips a little." "I hope that's okay." Luke hesitated before sitting down. "Oh, yeah, sure. I didn't know. Your friend didn't mention that." Maya's smile wavered just slightly, but she nodded. She didn't want to make it awkward. She gestured toward the menu, trying to move things along. They ordered drinks. She pointed to her favorite caramel latte, and he asked for black coffee. When the waiter left, there was a silence between them. Not just the kind that happens when people are thinking. This one felt heavier, like words were floating in the air but never reaching each other. Maya leaned forward and wrote, "So, how was your day?" He looked at the notepad, then gave a short shrug. "Busy work stuff," she smiled and nodded. She scribbled again, "What kind of work do you do?" He gave a half laugh. "Oh, this might be hard. I'm not used to, writing while talking." Maya quickly shook her head, signing and writing at the same time. "It's okay. Take your time." But he didn't pick up the pen. Instead, he pulled out his phone and began scrolling through something. Maya sat there quietly, unsure what to do. She sipped her latte, pretending not to notice how distant he seemed. Every time she looked at him, he was looking at the screen, not her. After a few minutes, he sighed and looked up. "You know, I really wish I'd known about this before." She blinked, confused. She picked up the pen. "About what?" He frowned slightly. "About you being deaf. I mean, it's not a big deal or anything, but I'm not really good with this kind of thing. Communication is important, you know?" Maya felt a small ache inside her chest. She forced a smile and nodded slowly, even though every word felt like a little crack in the moment she'd hoped would be special. She wrote carefully, "It's okay. I understand. It can be a bit hard at first, but once you get used to it, it's not so bad." He didn't smile back. He just gave a quick nod and looked around the cafe as if he wanted to be somewhere else. Maya followed his gaze. Other couples were laughing, leaning close, sharing bites of desserts, whispering things she could only guess. For a moment, she wished she could hear just one of those laughs. Not the sound, but the feeling behind it. Luke stood up suddenly. I think I should go. I just remembered I have to meet a friend soon. Maya's heart dropped. She opened her notepad again, trying to keep her voice steady through her hands. Oh, already? Yeah, he said, not meeting her eyes. Sorry. You seem nice, really. I just don't think this would work. He grabbed his coffee and walked away before she could reply. For a few seconds, Maya sat frozen, staring at the chair across from her. The soundless world around her seemed even quieter. She didn't cry, she just sat still, breathing slowly, trying to hold herself together. The waiter came by, glancing at the empty seat. Are you okay, miss? He asked gently. She looked up and smiled weakly. She couldn't hear his tone, but she could read his lips and see the kindness in his eyes. She nodded and gestured that she was fine. When he walked away, Maya turned to the window again. People still passed by, laughing, talking, living their moments. She wished she could be part of that flow, not sitting alone in a corner cafe with a heart that felt too heavy. Her phone buzzed, a message from her friend. How's it going? Is he nice? Maya stared at the screen for a long time. She started to type. He left, then deleted it. She didn't want to make her friend feel bad. Instead, she wrote, it just didn't work out. But thank you for setting it up. She set her phone down and wrapped her hands around the warm cup. The latte was almost cold now, but she took a sip anyway. It tasted bittersweet. She told herself it wasn't his fault entirely. Maybe he just didn't know how to handle it. Maybe he wasn't ready for someone like her, someone who lived in silence but felt everything deeply. Still, the small hope she had carried all day began to fade. She had imagined laughter, connection, maybe even a second date. Instead, she was left with an empty chair and a swirl of questions about why people found it so hard to look beyond what made her different. Outside, the sun was slipping lower in the sky, turning everything a shade of amber. Maya watched the reflection of her own face in the window, the girl with quiet eyes and a smile that had started to tremble. She thought about leaving, but something held her there. Maybe the need to gather herself before stepping back into the busy world. Maybe the wish that someone, anyone, would look at her and not see her deafness as a burden. For a long moment, she just stared out the window, lost in thought. The street was full of movement. Cars passing, a mother holding her child's hand, a man pushing a stroller, people carrying coffee cups, smiling at each other as they talked. Maya wondered how many of them were truly happy, how many felt lonely even in the middle of a crowd. She sighed softly, tracing a small heart on the side of her paper cup with her fingertip. Just then, a little laugh, not a sound she could hear, but one she could see, caught her attention. A small girl at a nearby table was drawing on a napkin, her face glowing with excitement as she showed her father her messy doodles. The man smiled at her, signing a few words that Maya recognized instantly. He knew sign language. Maya blinked, surprised. It wasn't something she often saw, strangers who signed. She couldn't help but watch for a moment. The way he signed to his daughter was gentle, patient. She couldn't catch every word, but she understood enough to know he was telling her she did a great job. Something in that small moment softened the ache in her chest. She looked back at her cup and smiled faintly. Maybe this day wasn't meant to give her what she expected. Maybe it was meant to remind her that kindness still existed, that the world could still surprise her, even when things went wrong. She didn't know it yet, but that man and his little girl would soon change everything she believed about love, understanding, and what it truly meant to be seen. For now, she just sat there quietly, watching the world move, unaware that her story had only just begun. The cafe had grown a little quieter after the lunch rush. Maya was still sitting at the same corner table, tracing patterns on her cup as the caramel latte cooled. The man who had left her there, the one she had hoped might see something more than her deafness, was gone. But his words lingered, echoing in her mind, not in sound but in memory. She kept telling herself it didn't matter. It wasn't the first time someone had walked away after finding out she couldn't hear. It probably wouldn't be the last. Still, no matter how many times it happened, it always stung in the same place. that quiet corner inside her heart where hope liked to hide. She packed her small notepad and pen into her bag and looked out the window again. The city outside was still moving, people going about their day as if the world didn't pause for heartbreak. She thought about leaving, but her legs felt too heavy, so she stayed just for a few more minutes, pretending she was simply waiting for someone, not recovering from being left behind. At the next table, a man with kind eyes sat with his young daughter. He looked around 30 or so, his hair slightly messy as if he'd rushed to get ready that morning. The little girl beside him was coloring on a napkin, completely focused on her drawing. Every now and then, she would sign something to him, and he would smile and reply in sign language, his hands moving gently, carefully. Maya couldn't help but notice. She had always felt drawn to people who signed. It was like seeing her own language out in the open, a silent connection in a noisy world. The girl dropped her crayon, and it rolled under Maya's table. The man got up, leaned down to pick it up, and gave her an apologetic smile. Maya nodded and smiled back. She could tell by the way he moved his lips that he said thank you, and she signed "You're welcome" without thinking. He paused for a moment, surprised but not uncomfortable. He signed back. "You sign?" Maya nodded, and a small spark of warmth filled the space between them. She didn't want to intrude, so she turned back to her bag, pretending to check her phone. But part of her wished she could join their conversation. Before she could stop herself, she looked back. The man was still signing with his daughter, and now the little girl noticed Maya watching. She waved shyly. Maya smiled and waved back, and the girl grinned wide, showing the kind of joy only children have. Simple, pure, and contagious. Maya laughed silently, her heart feeling a little lighter. It was such a small thing, but sometimes that was all it took. Still, the weight of what had happened earlier hadn't completely faded. She could still picture the look on Luke's face when he realized she was deaf. That moment of hesitation, like something inside him had changed. The way he'd looked at his phone instead of her. The way he'd said, "I don't think this would work." She replayed those words over and over, wondering what she could have done differently. Maybe she should have told him beforehand. Maybe she shouldn't have expected too much. Maybe she just wasn't meant for things like love and dating. The thought made her chest tighten. She opened her phone and typed a note to herself. "Stop blaming yourself for being you." Then she stared at it for a while before deleting it. Writing it didn't make it any easier to believe. A shadow passed her table. She looked up and saw Luke again. For a split second, she thought maybe he had come back to apologize, but he wasn't looking at her. He was heading toward the exit, phone pressed to his ear, laughing at something someone said on the other end. Maya froze, her fingers gripping the edge of her cup. She couldn't hear the sound of his laughter, but she could see it, and that somehow hurt more. He didn't look guilty or even thoughtful. He looked relieved, like leaving her behind had been the easiest thing in the world. Her chest burned. She stared at her reflection in the coffee's surface and whispered softly to herself, though no sound came out. "What's wrong with me?" The words hung in her mind like smoke she couldn't clear. She blinked hard, trying to push back the tears that wanted to rise. She didn't want anyone to see her cry, especially not the man and his daughter nearby. But emotions had their own timing. They never waited for privacy. Her shoulders trembled slightly, and before she could look away, a napkin appeared on her table. She looked up, startled. The man from the next table was standing there, his daughter peeking from behind his arm. He pointed to the napkin, where a few words were written in neat handwriting. "Are you okay?" Maya blinked, unsure what to say. Her instinct was to nod and smile, to pretend everything was fine. But when she looked into his eyes, something about his expression, gentle, not pitying, made her stop pretending. She shook her head slowly. The man nodded as if he understood completely. Then, to her surprise, he signed, "You don't have to talk about it, but you're not alone." That simple sentence, made only with hands, hit her harder than any words she could hear. She hesitated, then signed back. "Thank you." He smiled softly and pointed to his daughter. The little girl was watching with wide eyes, holding up her napkin, drawing proudly. It was a picture of 3 people holding hands under a sun. She signed clumsily, "This is you." Maya's lips curved into a real smile for the first time that afternoon. The man laughed silently and said to his daughter in signs, "She doesn't even know us yet." Maya giggled quietly and signed, "It's a beautiful drawing." The little girl grinned and went back to her table, humming softly to herself in a way that even Maya could feel, not through sound but through the happiness in her face. The man stayed for a moment longer, then signed again. "People can be cruel sometimes, but that says more about them than you." Maya looked down, her eyes shining with unshed tears. She signed slowly, "He left because I can't hear." He didn't even try. The man's expression softened. He sat down in the empty chair across from her, careful not to invade her space, and signed, "Then he wasn't someone worth your time. The right person will never walk away from who you are." For a moment, she didn't know what to say. No one had ever said something like that to her before, at least not like this, not in her language. He picked up a napkin and wrote something else. "You deserve better." Her throat tightened. She traced the words with her finger, as if they might fade if she didn't. She signed, "Thank you. I don't even know your name." He smiled and signed back, "I'm David, and this is Ella." He gestured toward his daughter, who was now folding her napkin, drawing carefully into her small backpack. Maya signed, "I'm Maya." He nodded. "Nice to meet you, Maya." There was a quietness between them then, but it wasn't heavy. It was warm, gentle, like a pause that felt right. Maya glanced down at her empty cup. She hadn't realized how long she'd been sitting there. She signed, "I should probably go soon." David nodded, then signed, "Would you like another coffee before you leave? My treat." She hesitated. Part of her wanted to say no, to stay in her safe shell and go home to the quiet of her apartment. But another part, the small, hopeful one, wanted to stay a little longer. She smiled and signed, "Okay, one more." When the waiter came over, David handled the order, and the 3 of them soon found themselves sharing the table. Ella kept drawing, occasionally showing her pictures to Maya, who responded with delighted expressions that made the little girl beam. David told her, through signs and notes, that his wife had passed away 3 years ago and he'd learned sign language because his daughter was hard of hearing in one ear. "That's why we sign," he said, moving his hands carefully. "It's our way of keeping her close to both worlds." Maya nodded. She admired the tenderness in the way he looked at his daughter, the patience in every gesture. It reminded her that love didn't always need sound. Sometimes it was in the quiet things, the look, the touch, the effort to understand. When it was finally time to leave, Maya stood up, feeling lighter than when she had arrived. She thanked David and Ella in signs, and they both smiled. As she walked toward the door, David called after her, not with his voice, but with his hands. He signed, "You deserve better, remember?" Maya paused, turned back, and signed, "I will remember." She stepped outside into the cool evening air. The city lights had started to glow, and for the first time that day, she didn't feel invisible. Someone had seen her. Not her silence, not her difference, but her. She breathed in deeply and let it out slowly, watching the sky turn from gold to violet. That day had started with rejection and ended with kindness. And sometimes, she thought, maybe that's how healing begins. Not with big changes, but with small, quiet moments where someone simply says, "You deserve better." She walked down the street, her steps light, her heart open. Somewhere behind her, a little girl waved through the cafe window, and Maya waved back, smiling to herself. She didn't know where life would take her next, but for the first time in a long while, she believed it might be somewhere good. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the curtains in soft golden lines. Maya lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the memory of yesterday replaying in her mind like a gentle movie she didn't want to end. She kept thinking about the man from the cafe, David, and his little girl, Ella. It was strange, she thought. A day that had begun with disappointment and hurt had ended with kindness from two people she hadn't even known that morning. The way David had looked at her when he signed "You deserve better" kept echoing in her heart. Those 3 words had done something that hours of self-talk never could. They had reminded her she wasn't the problem. Maya smiled to herself, rolling over to grab her phone from the nightstand. There was a new message from her best friend, asking how the date went. For a while, Maya didn't know how to respond. Finally, she typed, "It didn't go well, but I met someone kind at the cafe. Not a date, just a good person." Her friend replied with a heart emoji and wrote, "Sometimes good people come when we least expect them." That made Maya smile again. Later that afternoon, she decided to go for a walk. The sky was clear and the air had that fresh, clean smell that follows after rain. She walked through the city park near her apartment, watching children chase pigeons and couples sit on benches sharing snacks. She loved the way life kept moving even after hard days, like the world always found a way to keep spinning no matter what. As she passed a small playground, she noticed a familiar face near the swings. It was David helping Ella climb up the slide. For a moment, Maya froze. She hadn't expected to see them again so soon. She hesitated, unsure if she should walk over or not. What if it seemed strange? What if he didn't remember her? But before she could decide, Ella spotted her and waved excitedly, her small hands moving in quick, cheerful signs. Maya couldn't help but wave back. David turned, saw her, and smiled warmly. He signed, "Hey!" "What a nice surprise." Maya signed back, "Hi, I didn't know you come here." He nodded. "It's our favorite park. Ella loves the swings." Ella jumped off the slide and ran to Maya, holding up a small flower she had picked. "For you," she signed, grinning proudly. Maya crouched down to take it, her eyes soft with gratitude. "Thank you. It's beautiful." The girl giggled and ran back toward the swings. David walked closer, signing, "She doesn't often talk to new people, but she really likes you." Maya smiled and signed, "She's sweet." "You're a good dad." He looked down, a little shy at the compliment. "I try. Some days are harder than others." They sat on a nearby bench watching Ella play. The park was filled with quiet life. Birds fluttering in the trees, kids shouting joyfully, the soft sound of the wind moving through the leaves. Even though Maya couldn't hear it all, she could feel it in the rhythm of the world around her. She wrote on her notepad, "You sign really well." David laughed silently and replied in signs, "I had a good teacher, my wife. She taught me when we were dating." Maya's expression softened. "You said she passed away?" He nodded. "Yes, 3 years ago. It was hard, but Ella kept me going. She was only 3 then. I learned to sign even more because it helps her feel close to her mom." Maya touched his arm lightly, a gesture of quiet understanding. She signed, "You're strong." He smiled faintly. "Maybe, but I have my bad days too. We all do." There was a comfortable silence between them after that. They watched Ella laugh and run, her small hands flying through the air as she signed something funny to herself. Maya felt something warm blooming inside and a feeling of belonging, of calm she hadn't felt in a long time. After a while, David asked, "Do you come here often?" Maya shook her head. "Not really. I usually stay home. I read, draw, or work on my computer." "I like quiet places," he nodded thoughtfully. "Me too. But sometimes quiet can feel lonely, right?" Her eyes lowered. "Yes, especially when you want to share your silence with someone but no one's there to listen." David looked at her with an understanding that didn't need sound. "I get that," he signed. "Sometimes I sit alone after Ella's asleep and wish there was someone to talk to. Not about big things, just small ones, like how the day went or what dinner should be." Maya smiled gently. "Small things are what make life feel full." He nodded in agreement, and for a moment their eyes met in quiet connection. Ella came running back, her cheeks flushed from playing. She tugged at David's sleeve and signed, "Can Maya play with me?" David laughed and looked at Maya. She grinned and nodded. Soon the 3 of them were by the swings. Ella sat on one and Maya gently pushed her while David stood beside them, pretending to count how high she went. Ella squealed in delight, signing, "Higher, higher!" Maya laughed silently, the kind of laugh that shines more in the eyes than in sound. For a few minutes she forgot everything else, the rejection, the loneliness, the ache of yesterday. All that existed was the simple joy of the moment, the wind brushing against her hair, the warmth of the sun, and the happy little girl who had brought laughter back into her day. When they finally sat down again, Ella was tired but smiling. She leaned her head against her dad's arm, her eyes fluttering sleepily. David looked at Maya and signed, "You're good with her. She doesn't open up easily." Maya signed back, "Maybe she sees I'm quiet too. Sometimes quiet people understand each other better." He smiled, a little sad but also grateful. "Yeah, maybe you're right." They stayed there for a while longer, watching the sky turn a pale orange as the sun began to set. The air grew cooler, and a soft breeze stirred the leaves. When it was time to leave, Ella hugged Maya's leg quickly before running ahead toward the car. David followed, signing, "It was nice seeing you again. Maybe next time coffee's on me?" Maya's heart lifted. She signed, "I'd like that." He smiled and waved before walking away, holding Ella's hand. Maya stood there for a moment, watching them go. Something about the scene, the father and daughter walking hand in hand, filled her with a quiet kind of hope. She wasn't sure what it meant or where it would lead, but for the first time in a long while she wanted to find out. That night, she sat by her window with a sketch pad and began to draw. She sketched the small cafe from memory, the table by the window and 3 cups, hers, David's, and the tiny one that had held Ella's hot chocolate. Above the cups she wrote in small, soft letters, "Sometimes strangers teach us to see ourselves again." Over the next few days, Maya found herself smiling more often. She went out for walks, visited the park again, and each time she did, she hoped, quietly, without admitting it to herself, that she might see them again, and she did. They began meeting by chance, or maybe not by chance at all. Once at the grocery store, when David was struggling to reach a box on a high shelf, and Maya handed it to him with a playful smile. Another time at the library, where Ella ran up to Maya, signing excitedly about a book she liked. Each time, the moments felt natural, easy. What started as small coincidences slowly grew into a pattern of gentle friendship. They began sharing short messages, David sending her photos of Ella's drawings, Maya replying with pictures of her sketches. Their conversations were simple but full of warmth. Maya realized she looked forward to them more than she should. Not because she wanted something romantic, and at least not yet, but because she felt seen, truly seen in a way she hadn't for a long time. One evening, they met again at the park. The sunset painted everything in gold and rose. Ella was busy playing with other kids, leaving Maya and David sitting side by side on the bench. David looked at her, his hands moving slowly as he signed, "I'm glad we met that day." Maya smiled softly. "Me too. I was having a bad day, and then everything changed." He nodded. "You changed too. You smile more now." She looked away shyly. "Maybe because I feel less alone." David paused, then signed, "You're not alone." "Not anymore." Her heart fluttered at the words. They weren't romantic, not yet, but they were full of something deeper, something real. As the sky darkened and the streetlights came on, Ella ran to them, her tiny hands glowing in the light as she signed, "Come on, Daddy, let's go home." Maya watched them leave, feeling a warmth that lingered even after they were gone. She didn't know where this new chapter was leading, but she knew one thing for sure. It was the beginning of something honest, something that made her believe again in connection, kindness, and second chances. And as she walked home under the soft glow of the city lights, she whispered to herself, though no sound came, "Maybe I really do deserve better." The days slowly turned into weeks, and Maya's life began to feel different, lighter somehow. The sadness that used to sit quietly on her shoulders had started to fade. She still had her quiet evenings and her moments of loneliness, but now there were smiles mixed in too. Her phone would buzz every few days with a short message, a photo from David of Ella holding up another crayon drawing, or a text that said something like, "We're at the park again. You around?" Sometimes she would go, sometimes she would just smile at the screen, but every time she felt that same gentle warmth in her chest, like someone had turned on a small light inside her that she hadn't realized had gone out. One Saturday afternoon, she was walking by the lake with her sketchbook when she saw them again. Ella was sitting on a blanket eating cookies, and David was trying, with little success, to untangle the string of a kite. Maya laughed silently when she saw him struggling. He looked up, noticed her, and waved. She waved back and walked over. He pointed to the stubborn knot and signed, "I think this kite hates me." Maya grinned and signed, Maybe you're just holding it wrong. He pretended to look offended, then handed her the tangled string. She sat down beside him, took the kite string gently, and began to fix it. Their hands brushed once, just slightly, and both of them looked away for a second, smiling but pretending not to notice. When the string was finally free, she handed it back to him. "There," she signed proudly. He laughed and signed. "You're good at this. I should hire you as my kite expert." She rolled her eyes playfully and signed, "I'll charge you cookies for payment." Ella, who had been watching closely, immediately offered her a cookie. Maya took it, pretending to think deeply before signing. "Okay, deal." The three of them spent the afternoon flying the kite together. The sky was bright blue and the wind was strong enough to lift it high above the trees. Maya held the string while Ella jumped and clapped, and David stood beside them, his laughter showing in his eyes. Maya couldn't hear the sound of the kite fluttering, but she could feel the tug of the wind through the string, the rhythm of life flowing all around her. She looked at David and Ella, and for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like an outsider in the world. After a while, they sat back on the blanket to rest. Ella leaned against Maya's shoulder, munching on her cookies. David looked at them and smiled softly. He signed, "You're good for her. She talks about you all the time." Maya blushed slightly. "She's a special girl," she signed back. "I feel lucky she likes me." He hesitated, then signed, "She likes you because you're real. Most people don't really see her. You do." Maya looked down, tracing the edge of her sketchbook with her fingers. She didn't know what to say, so she simply smiled. After a few quiet moments, she opened her sketchbook and showed him one of her drawings. It was the cafe where they had first met, with 3 cups on the table. David looked at it for a long time, then signed, "You drew this?" She nodded shyly. He smiled. "It's beautiful. You're really talented." She signed, "Drawing helps me express things I can't say out loud." He looked thoughtful for a moment, then signed, "Maybe that's why I like talking to you. You listen without needing sound." Their eyes met, and something quiet and deep passed between them. It wasn't romantic yet, not fully. It was gentler than that, like the first breath before a word is spoken. The sun began to sink lower, turning the lake into a sheet of gold. Ella was starting to get sleepy, her head resting against her father's arm. David smiled and said it was time to go. Before they left, he signed, "Do you want to come to the market with us tomorrow? There's a small art fair nearby. Ella would love it, and I think you would too." Maya hesitated for a second, then nodded. "I'd like that." The next day they met at the market. It was busy and colorful, filled with small stalls selling paintings, handmade jewelry, and fresh flowers. Maya loved the energy. Even though she couldn't hear the music or the chatter, she could feel the life of it in the movements of the people and the bright colors around her. David and Ella walked beside her, stopping at every stall that caught the little girl's attention. Ella loved everything: the shiny beads, the sweet smell of baked bread, the colorful paintings that looked like rainbows splashed across canvas. At one stall, Maya stopped in front of a painting of 2 hands signing the word love. She stared at it quietly. The artist noticed and smiled, writing on a card, "Do you sign?" Maya nodded and signed back, "Yes. Beautiful painting." The artist signed, "It's my mother's language." They shared a small, warm smile, 2 strangers connected by a shared world of silence that didn't feel empty at all. David watched them from a few steps away, his expression soft. When Maya walked back, he signed, "I saw that. It looked like it meant something to you." She nodded. "It did. Sometimes when I meet people who sign, I feel less alone, like there's a secret world we understand that most people never see." He nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe that's what makes it special." They wandered through the market for hours, laughing in their own quiet way, through gestures, smiles, and the warmth in their eyes. When it was time to leave, Ella insisted on buying a small bracelet for Maya. It had tiny blue stones that sparkled in the sunlight. "For you," she signed proudly. "So you don't forget me." Maya's eyes grew soft. "How could I forget you?" She signed back, pulling the girl into a hug. David watched them, his heart full. He had seen how happy Ella was with Maya, how easy it was for her to talk, how bright her smile became. And somewhere deep inside, he felt something else too, something he hadn't let himself feel since his wife passed away. Hope. That evening, after they said goodbye, Maya walked home with a smile that wouldn't leave her face. The bracelet glimmered on her wrist, catching the light with every step she took. When she reached home, she sat by her window, looking out at the stars. She thought about how much had changed in just a few weeks. A blind date that had left her heartbroken had somehow led her to two people who made her believe again in kindness and connection. She opened her sketchbook and began to draw again. This time she drew the kite soaring above the park, with 3 figures below it holding the string together. The next few weeks went by in a happy rhythm. Maya and David started spending more time together. Sometimes they met for coffee, sometimes they took Ella to the park or the library. Every time, Maya felt her world grow a little larger, a little brighter. She noticed the small things about him, how patient he was with his daughter, how carefully he listened when she signed, how he smiled with his whole face. He wasn't perfect, but he was real. And that made all the difference. One evening, as they walked along the lake again, David looked at her and signed, "Can I tell you something?" She nodded. He hesitated, then signed, "When I lost my wife, I thought that part of my life was over. I promised myself I wouldn't get close to anyone again. It hurt too much." Maya watched him, her heart softening. He continued, "But then we met you. You've brought something back. Not just for me, but for Ella too. You remind us that life can still be good." Maya didn't know what to say. Her throat felt tight. Slowly, she signed, "You brought something back for me too. I had stopped believing people could see me for who I am. But you did." He smiled gently, and for a moment neither of them moved. The air between them was filled with quiet understanding. No sound, no rush. Just two people finding comfort in each other's company. Ella's laughter broke the stillness as she ran toward them, holding a handful of wildflowers. She gave one to each of them and signed, "Now we all match." David laughed, and Maya smiled so wide her eyes sparkled. They walked home together, the setting sun painting their shadows long across the path. That night, when Maya lay in bed, she realized she wasn't afraid of the silence anymore. It no longer felt empty. It was filled with memories. Laughter she could see, kindness she could feel, and a quiet promise that life could start again, even after heartbreak. She touched the bracelet on her wrist and smiled softly. Somewhere, deep inside, she knew something beautiful was growing between them, something she didn't want to rush or define yet.
Sometimes love didn't need big words or perfect timing. Sometimes it just began quietly, in shared silence, gentle smiles, and hands that spoke the same language. And that's exactly how it was beginning for Maya.
The days slowly turned into another month, and everything in Maya's life began to feel brighter. Her mornings didn't feel as heavy as they once did. The world still felt quiet, but not lonely anymore. There was color everywhere, in the morning light through her window, in the small drawings that Ella had made for her, in the gentle messages that David sent every few days. She often found herself smiling without realizing it. Sometimes it was because of a small photo Ella sent of her messy breakfast, or because of a text from David that said, "Ella insists we save you a cookie again." One chilly Sunday morning, Maya was sitting at her kitchen table sketching a new picture of the park. The sky outside was pale and soft rain touched the window. Just as she was about to add the last detail, there was a knock on her door. When she opened it, David was standing there, his jacket damp from the rain, holding a paper bag. Ella peeked out from behind him, grinning widely. He signed, "We brought breakfast." Maya laughed silently and stepped aside, motioning for them to come in. The smell of warm pastries filled her small apartment as they all sat down together. Ella took out her crayons and started drawing while David and Maya sipped coffee. After a moment, he looked at her and signed, You've made this place feel warm. It feels like home." She blushed slightly and signed, "It's small, but it's enough for me." He shook his head. "No," he signed, "it's perfect. You made it perfect." They talked through signs and small notes for hours, laughter showing on both of their faces even without sound. Maya realized that silence with the right people didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. When the rain finally stopped, they decided to go for a walk. The streets were wet and shining, and puddles reflected the gray sky. Ella splashed through them happily, her bright boots jumping from one puddle to another. As they walked, David slowed down and looked at Maya. He signed softly, "Can I ask you something?" She nodded. He hesitated for a second, his eyes serious but kind. "That night at the cafe when I saw you crying, I didn't know what to do. I just wanted to say something that would make you believe that people like him were wrong. Do you remember what I signed to you?" Maya nodded. Her heart warmed as she signed, "You said I deserve better." He smiled slightly. "I meant it. I still mean it." She looked down for a moment, unsure what to say. The memory of that painful night had changed into something softer now. Back then she had felt so small, so unwanted. But now, looking at him, she realized that kindness had found her in the exact moment she needed it most. They reached the park, and Ella ran ahead to the playground. The air smelled of rain and grass. David and Maya sat on a bench watching her. He turned toward Maya again and signed, "Can I tell you something I never said before?" She nodded, curious. "My wife used to tell me that life is like a river," he signed. "Sometimes it flows gently, sometimes it crashes and pulls you under. But if you keep moving, it always finds a new path." He paused for a moment, eyes soft. "When she passed away, I thought the river had stopped for me. But it didn't. It just led me here. To you." Maya's eyes filled with quiet emotion. She reached out and touched his hand gently. Her fingers trembled slightly, but her heart felt calm. She signed slowly, "Maybe we're both finding a new path." For a moment, they just sat there, hand in hand, watching Ella's laughter dance in the air. There were no words, no noise, but everything that needed to be said was already there, in their eyes, in their touch, in the peace that surrounded them. As weeks passed, their bond grew stronger. They started to meet more often, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just for a walk. David would practice his sign language with her, making small mistakes that made Maya laugh silently. He never minded being corrected. In fact, he seemed to love learning, especially when it made her smile. Ella, of course, adored Maya. She would often draw little family pictures that included all three of them, stick figures holding hands, standing under a big blue sky. One day she handed one to Maya and signed proudly, "This is us, my family." Maya's eyes softened and she hugged the little girl tightly. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she truly belonged somewhere. One Saturday they went back to the same cafe where everything had started, the same one where Maya had been rejected months before. She hesitated at the door for a moment, memories flooding back, but David gently touched her shoulder and signed, "You're not alone this time." She took a deep breath and nodded. Together they walked in. They chose a corner table near the window, the same spot she had sat in that painful night. But now the place looked different. The colors seemed brighter, the air warmer. Maybe it wasn't the cafe that had changed. Maybe it was her. Ella ordered a muffin and David asked for 2 coffees and 1 hot chocolate. When the waiter came, Maya noticed something. He smiled at her kindly and asked, "Do you need me to write anything down?" She shook her head and signed, "Thank you." For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel out of place. As they sat there, David leaned forward slightly and signed, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if that night had gone differently?" Maya thought for a moment, then signed, "Maybe I would have had a nice dinner, but I wouldn't have met you." He smiled and signed, "Then I'm glad it went the way it did." She laughed silently, shaking her head. "Me too." They spent the rest of the day wandering through the city, the 3 of them side by side. They stopped by the bookstore, shared ice cream, and laughed through quiet conversations. Maya noticed how natural everything felt. She didn't have to hide or explain herself. She could just be. That evening, David dropped her off at her apartment. The sky was painted orange and pink, the city lights beginning to glow. He looked at her for a long moment before signing, You've changed my life in ways I can't explain. Maya felt her heart swell. She signed back, You and Ella gave me back my hope. He smiled softly and then, with no rush, no grand gesture, he reached out and gently held her hand. She didn't pull away. They stood there for a while, not needing to speak. The silence between them was full of warmth, of understanding, of everything that had brought them to that moment. After they said goodnight, Maya watched them walk away from her window, David holding Ella's small hand as they disappeared down the quiet street. She felt something deep inside her shift. It wasn't loneliness anymore. It was peace. The next morning, she woke up early and went back to the lake where they used to fly kites. The air was cool and the sky was just beginning to brighten. She took out her sketchbook and began to draw. The water, the trees, and then 3 figures holding a kite together. She smiled at the memory of that day. As she finished, she noticed movement nearby. David and Ella were there walking toward her, carrying a new kite. Ella waved excitedly. David smiled and signed from a distance. We thought we'd find you here. Maya laughed silently and signed back. You were right. They flew the kite together again, just like before. The wind lifted it high, and the string pulled tight between them. Ella squealed with joy, jumping up and down, while Maya and David held the string together. At one point, David looked at her and signed softly. You know, life has a strange way of giving second chances. Maya nodded. Yes, she signed back. And this time I'm not afraid to take it. He smiled, his eyes shining in the sunlight. As the kite danced across the sky, Maya looked up and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Complete. Not because everything was perfect, but because she had finally learned that even after heartbreak, the heart knows how to heal. Life hadn't given her what she expected, but it had given her something better. People who saw her, who listened to her silence, and who loved her without needing words. When the kite string finally came down and Ella ran to catch it, Maya and David stood side by side, their hands brushing lightly. The wind whispered through the trees and the world around them seemed to pause for just a moment. Maya looked at him and smiled, her hands signing softly. Thank you for finding me. He shook his head and signed back. No, you found me. And in that quiet, simple moment when you without any sound, without any grand gestures, love spoke the loudest. The girl who was once rejected on a blind date had found something far more beautiful than what she had hoped for. Understanding, kindness, and a family that spoke the same language of the heart. And as the sun set over the park, the kite still flying gently above them, Maya knew one thing for sure. She truly did deserve better. And now she had found it.